English translation 258th contact. Thursday 20th of February, 1997, 1847 hours.
Well, you are here already, my friend. Actually, I was not expecting you until tomorrow. Greetings.
I also greet you, Edward. My visit today is because tomorrow I will be busy elsewhere and will not have time to visit you. Unfortunately, my friend, I do not have much time today either, because I have to do my duties again soon, which call me to Era. We do not have more than about 1.5 hours if you still have special questions.
This time should be enough. I only have a few private questions, and even the official questions do not take very much time. So I would like to ask you about your research regarding the drama in the USA, where a passenger plane exploded and crashed in Mauritius Bay. You promised me that you would tell me what happened there as soon as you clarified everything. That is probably why you are here now, is it not?
That is right. Well, our guess was correct regarding the circumstances of the crash of the TWA 800 plane on the 17th of July, 1996, in the Mauritius Bay area. The cause of the disaster was a rocket missile from the U.S. Navy that erroneously positioned the aircraft on its equipment as an unknown foreign missile and thus identified as a UFO, whereupon the command went out to launch this missile without excuse because through the haste and great carelessness, the airplane was classified as an unknown flying object and in certain respects the national security of the USA had supposedly been threatened. This fact is now, of course, concealed by all means available to the government, the secret services, and the Navy.
The TWA crash off Long Island becomes more and more mysterious.
Shortly after Pierre Salinger's new theories, U.S. investigators concede for the first time that a missile may have hit the Jumbo. When journalist Pierre Salinger theorized in November that the TWA Jumbo off Long Island had been accidentally shot down by a U.S. Navy missile, it was said that he was just trying to make a name for himself. But gradually the authorities are running out of explanations. They have been silent for too long. Salinger refers to video recordings made by air traffic controllers at Kennedy Airport in New York on the evening of the accident. In a series of 69 radar images taken shortly before the crash, the Jumbo can be seen and an object rapidly approaching the plane. Salinger claims that it could only be a missile, as it came from the direction in which the U.S. Navy regularly holds firing exercises. Moreover, he claims to have a tape recording of a young sailor shouting, "We shot at the plane, down." But it is not so much the evidential value of Salinger's statements that is causing the authorities distress. Rather, they wonder why there is still no clear explanation as to what investigators believe was the cause of the crash. Even in the serious U.S. press, speculation is again taking hold as to whether the Pentagon, FBI, and White House are involved in a vast conspiracy to cover up the cause of the crash of TWA Flight 800. In fact, the case is becoming more and more mysterious. James Callistrom, chief investigator in the TWA case, speaks of false allegations and frivolous chatter. At the same time, however, he has now for the first time admitted the possibility that a missile could have hit the Jumbo. The difference? Callistrom thinks it could only have been a terrorist missile. Now, the nation is puzzled as to why he is so sure. If it really was friendly fire on the 17th of July, 1996, it would have been an embarrassment not only for the crisis-ridden Navy. In the midst of the election campaign, the scandal would also have damaged President Clinton's chances of victory. And then, there is something else. Salinger believes the crash was caused by a kinetic missile in the course of secret tests, which violates the agreements of the SALT-I Treaty. The government would therefore have to face the accusation of developing new weapons in violation of international law.
Original newspaper article source, https SABUE. Berliner Zeitung. The Saturday, 15th March 1997.
This is really awesome. But tell me, do you not violate your directives with this declaration? Because you know that I like to put such matters officially on paper as contact reports.
We also thought about this and therefore asked the High Council whether the declaration could be official or not. The view of the High Council was that the event was such an inhuman crime that it should be officially announced. Under the guise of national security, the High Council declared, the U.S. military and the U.S. intelligence services and their government committed such disgraceful crimes in secret missions that the worldwide public should be made aware of them in order to denounce all the disgraceful machinations and bring them to a standstill over time. However, we are not allowed to do this ourselves and not officially, but we are only allowed to give the necessary information through you, which then leaves it up to you and others to disseminate it in a beneficial form.
But these crimes also fall under secrecy in America.
That is correct, but by the promise of the High Council we may give you the information in this particular case for official use.
I thank the High Council. And of course, the thanks also go to you who have clarified the circumstances of this criminal event. And while we are at the USA, recently a journalist named Luisa Francia told me that on the 17th of April 1897 in or near one of the USA Aurora, a UFO, respectively a spaceship, crashed and exploded. Do you have any records and do you know anything about it?
I know the story, because you asked Florina for a pertinent clarification, which we also carried out and whose result was negative. No, it can be said with complete certainty that on the date mentioned neither in Aurora nor anywhere else on Earth an interplanetary aircraft crashed. Neither one of us nor any of our Federation members or any other foreigner outside the Earth known or unknown to us. And before you ask, because the question is already on your tongue, no. For the entire time of the 19th century, we could not find any evidence of a crash of a foreign aircraft in the area of Aurora or its surroundings.
This question was actually already on my tongue. But I have some other questions. For about 2 weeks, there has been a lot of screaming in the world about animal cloning. It has also come out that in Belgium or so, a child was cloned 4 years ago, about which it is said that it happened unintentionally. Do you know anything about this, and was it really a so-called clone accident? And what do you think about cloning in general? Is this to be prevented for the length of the future or not? Respectively, does it belong to the evolutionary path of humankind or not?
The case of the 4-year-old child you mentioned today is known to us. For what, and in whose case we are naturally interested, because all evolution concerns on Earth, and consequently also with earthly humankind, belong to one of our tasks. In the cloning of the child in question, it is absolutely certain for us that it was not an accident or an oversight or something like that, but that there was a full intention and an associated effort behind the action. Statements to the contrary correspond to statements of lies. With regard to cloning itself, it must be said, just as in genetic science or genetic manipulation, that everything is inevitable in the long run, because even the cloning of humans, animals, and plants belongs absolutely to the evolutionary process of humans and cannot be prevented. Everything is only a question of time before this process openly begins, as is the case with genetic manipulation.
Well, then I have got something more awkward here. One of our new core group members is standing up against the payment of a monthly membership fee. For this reason, it would be important for us to know how we have to calculate a minimum membership fee, etc., because we know that we are dependent on every membership fee.
These concerns are regulated by your statutes, namely according to valid Swiss legislation, based on the ZGB respectively Zivilgesetzbuch Art. 71.2 Beitragspflicht, where it says literally, the contributions of the members are fixed by the statutes. As long as there is no such determination, the members have to pay the contributions necessary for the pursuit of the association's purpose and to cover the association's debts in equal parts.
Fabulous, as you know by heart. But of course I know what you are saying. However, we have puzzled over how we should determine a minimum membership fee as a result of a minimum income, and from when a member becomes liable to pay membership fees, whether from the age of majority or after completion of the training. And what should be for further training? That is to say, for second occupation training and courses, or further training courses, etc.
To want to work out a minimum contribution on the basis of a minimum income is illusory. Also in the core group, you have to accordingly arrange it so that, as in the passive group, a fixed annual contribution is set, whereby this must be divided, however, on 12 months, because the core group members pay their contributions monthly.
You suddenly no longer speak of groups, just of group. But it is not important. How high should this fixed membership fee be, and should it apply only to the Swiss, or also to Germans and Austrians and other compatriots?
With regard to the fact that the core group members form the essence of the entire formation and have to provide the greatest performance in every respect, I find that a fixed annual membership fee of CHF 1200 is fair and reasonable, and therefore a fixed membership fee of CHF 100 per month is payable. This was already calculated earlier by Ketzel and should have been introduced as a duty by you for a long time, but you forgot to do it in 1983. However, due to your collapse on the 4th of November 1982, you lost a large part of your memory, which is why you probably forgot to introduce this regulation in our core group. So now I ask you to make up for it in the form that the amount of CHF 100 applies to all citizens of all countries, no matter what the earnings of a group member are per month. Of course, the current expenses cannot be covered by this small membership fee, which is why it is necessary that each core group member voluntarily contributes higher fees according to his or her real income and their effective expenses at their own discretion. In this regard, however, the provision shall be left to the individual group members, whereby it may be expected that the necessary honesty plays along, and that neither the group nor its mission and other members are disadvantaged. If someone is dishonest or parasitic, then such a person does not belong in the core group anyway, even if their destiny has led them to the core group. With regard to the age at which membership fees are to be paid, we have also discussed this earlier and have stated that a monthly fee should be due when a person is in full employment, which can already be the case at the age of 17 or 18 if no profession is learned. However, since this age is usually below the age of majority, it should be the case that youths under the age of majority only pay a membership fee if they themselves determine so. Otherwise, the membership fee shall only be claimed with the age of majority when a member is in full income. Concerning the age of majority, however, you must consider that there are different laws in the individual countries. If core group members are undergoing training, they will only be required to pay membership fees once they have completed their apprenticeship, which may take up to the 24th or 25th year of age, or even longer, depending on whether academic professions, etc., are being learned. If, however, the first training is finished, then the membership fee obligation comes into force. If after the first training you attend further training, courses or further education courses, as you said, then the membership fee obligation still applies if you earn full earnings after that. Further training of any kind must not be of importance with regard to the membership fee obligation. If a full income is given, because an exemption from the fee obligation would be unfair towards all other paying members. If precarious financial situations occur with members, whereby higher voluntary contributions cause problems, then still, according to the situation, a good solution can be found, by which, for example, apart from the not changeable CHF 100 membership contribution, no voluntary higher contributions are paid. A further solution for such situations besides the CHF 100 monthly membership fee would be a 5% additional fee for each amount exceeding CHF 2000 respectively, DM 2000 and so forth.
The CHF 100 is one of your stipulations to be held by us?
That is the meaning of my words. Also, the further discussed interests are to be regarded as determined by us because they correspond to the necessary fairness. Only regarding the 5% or the exemption in relation to higher voluntary contributions should the core group decide.
Understood. My next question relates to the South German Study Group, for which Eva has done the bookkeeping so far. This group has now obtained an official registration. Therefore, it has to keep its own bookkeeping according to the legal regulations, which could also relieve Eva. What should we do now?
Through the official registration, the case is clear. From now on, the group must keep its own accounts, but the auditors of the center's core group must audit the accounts annually or every 6 months. The core group shall determine how often the audit must be performed.
I will present the group's concerns to the vote. Then another question. Last Sunday we made the agenda, which resulted in several anonymous agenda items being submitted, but which I rejected because I think we cannot afford such agenda items, because otherwise an anonymous hackle and so on would soon emerge. What do you think about that?
You did the right thing. You should never accept anonymous agenda submissions because they would cause discord and the like.
Unfortunately, there was also an item on the agenda that I actually wanted to put forward regarding the Russian aid and the holiday guests from Russia, as the two of us discussed on your last visit. To bring this matter before the group would actually be important, but I wanted to postpone it to the meeting in May because of the anonymous agenda, which partly deals with the problem of aid to Russia.
It would be important for you to present the facts at the next meeting, but with the note that the agenda will not be discussed for the sake of anonymous submission, but for the sake of our discussion and urgency.
Okay, then I will do what is necessary. One more question about Hale-Bopp. Various people call this space vagabond a century comet, but I do not understand why this is done and such a cry is made, because other comets were in our solar system this century, which were much more impressive. Like, for example, the Arend-Roland comet in 1957, which could be observed by the naked eye in the bright evening sky with a size of about 1 moon diameter and with a red-yellow-gold tail about 25 meters long, which shimmered in the evening sun. In addition, starting from the comet's head, as its tip, so to speak, a long needle-like structure could be seen, almost like a swordfish. I still remember all this very well. Also in 1910, there was a beautiful and rare comet spectacle, when Halley's Comet passed by, offered a fantastic spectacle, and was to be seen much bigger and more radiant than Hale-Bopp. It was so close to the Earth that it put it in his tail. I read a lot about it, but also old people told me a lot about it, who raved about this comet as well as about Arend-Roland.
On the one hand, people forget such experiences very quickly, and on the other hand, today's enthusiasts are still too young to have had these experiences themselves. Even records made according to the events are often so unsatisfactory that reality is only passed on extremely inadequately. This also applies to the 2 comets you mentioned, which you really described according to how they were seen from the Earth.
I find this Hale-Bopp at least compared to the Arend-Roland comet, which I saw myself in 1957, simply small and inconspicuous, and the fuss and shouting about it almost ridiculous.
which you are not wrong about.
Even with regard to the hottest and driest year of this century, hardly anyone can remember, except for a few old people who went through life with open eyes and senses. But I remember the year 1947, when I was just 10 years old, when it did not rain anymore from May until late autumn, and when the summer temperature was 47 degrees Celsius, so much dried up. But it also turned out that certain fruit trees were blooming twice and were over and over full of blossoms, after which fruits formed a second time, but not all of them became ripe. But at least the sugar pears and small apples ripened a second time. When the heat was over, heavy thunderstorms hit the country, some of them with hailstones the size of hens' eggs, causing devastation and even clearing entire stretches of forest.
Your memory does not deceive you. Unfortunately, however, it is generally the case that humans forget such events very quickly. This is also the case for all the incidents that have been rolling over the earth in ever worse form for years. One observes only all the events like earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, landslides, floods, the brutal extermination of seals, sharks, whales, and many other animals, like elephants, rhinos and tigers, etc. Also, wars and other armed conflicts of all kinds are becoming more and more prevalent around the world, as well as the shamelessness of humans in every respect. Consequently, they also openly pursue the worst pornography and inhumane prostitution, sex shows, and sexual child abuse. There is already chaos and anarchy everywhere, and the human being destroys his or her foundations of life, as well as his or her right to be allowed to call themselves human at all. Everything negative takes over more and degenerates and becomes a sign that the catastrophe can no longer be stopped. If during the 80s the signs and machinations for a third world war have evaporated, these have increased again in the last 3 years to such an extent that they can hardly be stopped. This means that a third world war is almost finally programmed and can hardly be stopped, and perhaps everything is just a matter of time before it breaks out. And this time, if it should actually come, then the war will not be announced in advance but will break out without warning. Peace is talked about and negotiated about everywhere, but regardless of this action, the war will suddenly break out. So it will be that peace will be called, and then the war will suddenly come, out of the blue, as you like to say. And if this Third World War will be even brief, its horrors and annihilations will be more violent than in the 2 previous world wars.
Beautiful prospects, but the humans today are so sick in their heads with their thinking, their desires, lusts, delusions, wishes, ideas, and attitudes, etc., as never before. An ancient prophecy that the resulting catastrophe will not be too long in coming.
That is right. Everything is just a matter of time. However, this comes closer and closer and fast if the Earth humans do not still think of something better, and everything can be prevented, which is to be hoped.
And no one can escape when it arrives. But we should not talk about it any further, because the humans tend to be terribly afraid when such things are mentioned. And we want to avoid creating angst.
Of course. In my words, there was also not this sense, but they should be simply informative, so that the humans think about it.
It is clear to me, but we have to take into account the fact that there are a lot of people around who are defilers and scaremongers, who write big, thick books full of nonsense and frighten people with it, just to make a profit out of it. Especially the signs of the times, as all the past, present, and future events have been called since time immemorial, give rise to books for many profit seekers, with which horrendous money is made and people are frightened. Of course, the signs of the times are undeniable, but this does not have to be an unnecessary disgrace in order to exploit people through fear, and even make them dependent on faith with regard to all the written nonsense, or with regard to actual predictions and prophecies. That is my view.
against which really nothing can be objected. What other questions do you have to ask?
Actually, no more. Therefore, we can only discuss the purely private things.
That is good, because my time, you know.
Sure. Then the following. But wait a moment. I had noticed in the matter of the alleged UFO crash in Aurora on April 17, 1897, that you were talking about a UFO in the area of an aurora. Does this mean that you have made clarifications in every area where there is a place called Aurora?
As I took the trouble to find the different auroras in the USA, I came across 10 of them, which I wrote down here.
There is a place called Aurora in North Carolina, USA, in Colorado, USA, Illinois, USA, Indiana, USA, Kansas, USA, Minnesota, USA, Missouri, USA, Nebraska, USA, New York, USA, and Utah, USA. I also found an aurora in the Pacific Ocean, PT. Macquarie and one each in Angola, Brazil, Ontario, Canada, South Africa, and Mindanao, Philippines.
That is right. We actually considered all areas in and around the American towns of Aurora and clarified everything that was necessary. And in order to prevent any misunderstandings or omissions, we have also done everything to create clarifications in all areas of the remaining worldwide places called Aurora. We have even been considering areas where in earlier times places called Aurora existed, such as American Texas, etc. When we were unable to find anything in any of these areas, we monitored the entire Earth during the 19th century, but this did not lead to any result in terms of a crash of a non-Earth aircraft.
And how certain is this result?
Absolutely.
So then the information I have received from various sources is nothing but fantasy. In all, I was told about this alleged UFO crash, that on the 17th of April 1897, in or near a place called Aurora in the USA, a large aircraft exploded and crashed in a huge fireball, after which a piece of metal was allegedly found in the judge's garden of Aurora.
Of course this is nonsense, because such an aircraft neither exploded in the air nor crashed. But what could be related to this is the fact that we found out on the date mentioned by you in Aurora in America that disappeared from the map today. A meteor shot past and exploded high above the place, from which strange pieces of metal were also thrown off.
Concerning cloning, I have another question, the answer of which is clear to me, but which I would like you to confirm, so that there is an official answer in the contact report. If a life form, no matter if human or animal, is cloned, then, as is well known and logical, an image of the life form from which the material for the cloning originates is created. This is actually clear to every rational person who is orientated towards it. On the other hand, it seems to be the case that not everything is clear for different humans with regard to the spiritual form and the overall consciousness block, which is why I was asked about the real connections. What has been clear to me since time immemorial, I also gave as an answer, that in a cloned life form, a part of the spirit form and the overall consciousness block of the original material donor does not move into the new body, but a completely different spirit form with its own overall consciousness block. Thus, of course, it also appears that in both the clone material donor and the clone two completely different spirit forms and overall consciousness blocks come into play, whereby of course the mental and consciousness-based development of the clone donor and the clone are completely different. There is therefore no need for equality in this respect, because nothing can be inherited in this regard. Heredity of characteristics and attributes, etc., can only occur in physical form. For example, complete equality of the body, physical abilities, deficiencies or movements, etc.
For my part, I would have explained the connections in this form too. Your explanations correspond to the actual facts.
Thank you. I would also like to say that I think it is simply stupid what Greenpeace and the Greens as well as the like-minded, are doing about protest actions and other idiotic counteractions concerning genetic engineering. Instead of creating useful laws to protect genetic engineering and cloning, these idiots have to make terror and prevent everything from working properly. This inevitably leads to a situation where one day, genetic engineering and cloning technology will degenerate, and there will be no relevant laws at all, which will undoubtedly end in a fiasco, as prophecies already say. We have already talked about this, but I wanted to say it again. And with that, my friend, I have shot all my official powder, so that we can now go over to the private. That is, if I can still get one last question answered, which came up in a conversation conducted lately, which was about the psychological balance. You once explained to me that with negative and ill thoughts and associated negative and ill feelings, the production of a certain amino acid is so greatly reduced that the production of another necessary substance, which is necessary for the balance of the psyche, is also reduced. In this context, you also mentioned that the same thing happens when a person suffers from hunger, including slimming diets. I do not know what the two substances you mentioned are called anymore.
What you say is correct. The basic cause that negative and pathological thoughts and similar feelings damage and upset the psyche is the same as in diet-related starvation cures. Starvation cures, at least dietary form as well as negative, pathological thoughts and similar feelings trigger a chemical process that reduces the production of the amino acid tryptophan, which in turn is necessary for the production of serotonin, which regulates and ensures the maintenance of mental balance.
And how are these substances called here on the Earth?
The terms I mentioned are the ones you know.
Thank you, that is enough. Then I have no more official questions.